All right, now that I am on my duotone color layer, I get to start having some fun. Painting, transitioning, adding little tones of different temperatures, especially in things like skin tones where we expect different values to show up. And they'll just show up underneath the grays very subtly because I'm doing it at a low opacity. I'll even make it a little bit lower so it's more subtle. And with a soft-edged brush. And so for hairline, this is a really good place to try this out because hairlines are soft. But it's complicated to know like where the color really transitions the most and what that looks like. So we just kind of have fun and play with it gently until it looks right. And this is, the duotone layer is less about stealing colors from reference and using them, and more about painting with the colors you've already chosen, but letting them overlap with each other and mix. Because we're talking about very small variations. But if you choose the right tones and you do it right with the right kind of thinking behind it, it will really make a lot of difference. It won't feel like just one flat color, it will feel like multi-dimensional color. So you see how his eyes are really starting to feel more soulful, more complex. More like a full color photograph. This is where digital coloring has advantages over the traditional analog processes of colorizing, because we can add this little subtlety. We can add some deep redness to his lips and then subtly paint and mix it in. So he's got that variation. I'm a little worried about his bow tie. That looks complicated, but I'll get to it. Now, not every texture needs such careful attention, but I'd say the faces do, hair does. These are textures we pay a lot of attention to. Don't forget eyebrows. They're not painted on, they're very subtle, but that hair colors the skin around them, changes the saturation a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of a golden tone to the highlight side of his face. And then the reds more to the shadows. Okay, now this is where I can transition a little bit in the bow tie too. Whereas before I just had these two very strong shapes, color blocked shapes. Now I can work between the two a little bit and soften some of them, break up their edge a little bit, and introduce a little bit more color, or even a new color. very gently. Until things just kind of fit a little better overall. This is the kind of project that some students just really latch onto and enjoy, and then others, they're just fighting with it the whole time. It's terrible. So it's not a universally loved practice, but it's important for digital photography students to know that you have this ability to replace all color at any time. So there's no excuse not to be fully committed and fully confident of the color in your photographs, because that is the one formal element that as digital photographers you have more control of than any other. And that's because color was introduced so late to photography that it's almost entirely done in processing, not in the exposure. And it's still quite subjective. You still see things advertised as having true color. That's because that's just not something we expect from film generally. And now every bit of media is color corrected digitally before we see it. Not just print ads and photographs, but also movies, TV commercials, just everything. All right, so let's see what difference in the bow tie. Crazy what all those duotone colors do to it. Right? But then when mixed with the grays, that looks a lot more dimensional, a lot more believable. Again, kind of stealing colors from yourself. Just slight shading on the shirt. Slight softening of the edges of the lapels of the suit. So these divisions feel more natural and less arbitrary. Brightening of parts of the shirt, softening. This really is kind of the fun part. And trying to keep the big picture in mind, though it's easy to get seduced into little details. Okay, so those colors in the head, I don't need to do them to such an extent everywhere else, but if there are some that I think are ultimately really helpful, I want to put those into the other skin tones. Especially around the midtones where you get the most saturation, where the highlights break into the shadows. Some of these gold notes, or these pink notes in the skin. Especially in the midtones, right? That's where you can see the most color. So now I've introduced kind of two colors here that I can kind of paint with to make his handkerchief look more dimensional with color, less flat and simplistic. But it all starts at a solid foundation of a flat local color that you're comfortable with. And now it's just refining. which can go on endlessly. You see all these kind of warm tones in the guitar? I can introduce those in very subtle ways with this duotone layer. I can put gentle striations in the guitar, shadows underneath the fretboard of the strings, little warmth. Let's make a little bit of difference, but it will really make it feel more dimensional. It's like dodging and burning. Now, why am I not using dodge and burn? Well, I certainly could. To do these duotone layers, I could simply do an overlay layer of 50% gray and then dodge and burn. It's not a bad idea at all. And just lighten and darken the different colors. But I like introducing new color temperatures into my coloring this way. So maybe I introduce a little bit of a blue or a little bit of the blue of the suit into the guitar just so I can mix with it. And give the guitar a little bit of that full spectrum complexity, which things have in real life. So now there are not just blues in the guitar and golds, but also all the greens and all the overlaps of those colors in between. And I can paint those wherever I see like a smudge or something missing from the guitar. I can introduce crazy bright colors and then have to paint those back and mix those in because I'm doing it at a low opacity, softly. It will all read, and it will give more variety, more believability to those textures. Okay, so that's all duotone. That fretboard looks too clean, right? Take some of this dirtiness. Low opacities, softly introduce little smudges, little differences in color, little variations. Around the corners at joints, and then just paint them back again. The strings, I can have certain highlights pop out just slightly, low opacity. But not losing sight of the big picture. You don't want anything pulling too much attention. Okay, so once we're done, how do we finish this? Well, let me look at the background now and let me see what other things I can do to improve it. So that's my flat color. This is my duotone color over the top of my flat color. This is with the blacks and grays. One thing I can try is I can duplicate that blacks and grays layer, turn off the one that's locked, and adjust the levels. Maybe brighten them a bit if I want more of my color to come through. You know, always starting with the midtones. Yeah, that works pretty well. You don't usually want to deepen your shadows because that just hides more of your color, but you could try limiting your shadows a little bit to let even more of the color come through, like in the suit. And that will replace the grays with your color, right? You can brighten your whites, but ultimately